Welcome back, everybody. Let's talk about The Suicide Squad, which is not to be confused with Suicide Squad, which released in 2016, which, if you're familiar with that film, it's basically a comic book adaptation of the same name, where they basically team up a bunch of supervillains from the DC universe to go against impossible odds. Therefore, Suicide Squad. And also, if you're familiar with that film, you know a lot of the controversies around it, how it got kind of butchered by the studios through production and even post-production, and kind of resulted in a lot of mixed reviews, including Jared Leto's interpretation of the Joker. So that resulted in this film being a soft reboot slash sequel of sorts. Yeah, they kind of pulled a Hulk on us, with the Hulk 2003 film was met with poor reviews, so they did a sort of soft reboot sequel with The Incredible Hulk, which was supposed to be an MCU movie, which I'm sure a lot of you have forgotten about. And the movie was actually helmed by James Gunn, who's famous for the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. And it's funny to see the log of what this film went through, sifting through directors, actors, and even different storylines. It's really fascinating to see all the changes that were made along the way before filming even began, but if you want to Google that, it's pretty interesting. And so we do get a lot of returning actors, including Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn, who's since then become a bit of a cultural icon, including getting her own solo film, Birds of Prey. And we see the return of Viola Davis as Amanda Waller, who is the character who puts together these Suicide Squad teams, as well as Joel Kinnaman, who plays Colonel Rick Flag, as well as the return of Captain Boomerang, for some reason. But we have a sizable cast of new characters, including Peacekeeper, played by John Cena, King Shark, voiced by Sylvester Stallone, and one of the best additions is the Polka Dot Man, played by David Dastmalchian, the Thinker, played by Peter Capaldi, and we also have Bloodsport, played by Idris Elba, whose character is sort of strangely similar to Will Smith's character Deadshot from the previous movie. I think because Will Smith was supposed to have returned to this production, but busy schedule and all. So they got Idris Elba instead, who has sort of an eerily similar plotline going on. We got a veteran actor playing a veteran mercenary who's really good at aiming and shooting, who has issues with his daughter, who's forced into the mission to take on a leadership type role. Yeah, so really eerily similar. But this time around, the main character is British, which automatically makes him better. And Ratcatcher 2, played by Cleo Katzo, whose father, Taika Waititi, actually plays a small bit, which in itself is pretty funny. And so the plot of this film is that two Suicide Squad teams are sent to an island to investigate secret mission Starfish, which sounds pretty funny unless you've seen the advertisement, so you know it is quite literally an alien starfish named Starro the Conqueror, who's a kaiju-sized starfish taking over the world. So keeping that plot in mind, what makes this movie honestly better than the last movie is that it embraces its sort of silly, ridiculous comic book logic, which allows for its style to flourish and just makes it a lot of fun. Which is probably going to answer the big question, is this really better than the previous Suicide Squad? And the answer is yes. But what I would conclude is that for the most part, it's pretty much the same film, but just better. It is funnier, it's got better action, and it really embraces its sort of goofiness within the comic book pages. But because it embraces that silliness so much, you're having fun the entire time. But one warning I do have is that this movie is ultra violent. You're going to see a lot of blood and guts throughout the film. But with that said though, I would still say this movie is not fantastic. But it's definitely better and more rewatchable than the previous film. So my main reason for saying that is that I feel like a lot of the action scenes do go on for a very long time. There's definitely a lot of humor sprinkled throughout it as well, but that also means there's a lot of ultra violence throughout the film. Now, for this kind of movie, it's sort of expected to see a lot of blood and gore and all that kind of stuff, but it's so frequent throughout the film, you kind of get desensitized by it by the end of the movie. It's no longer shocking or even really all that cool to look at anymore. So that sense of pacing is really off, at least it was for me when watching it. But we do get some entertaining sequences like Harley Quinn's fight scene where she takes out a whole squad of guys and flowers are bursting out of her for honestly no other reason than just style that I could tell. And the humor, as always, is pretty spot on with its sort of dark comedy, because right in the beginning of the film, we have two teams of Suicide Squads, and one basically just gets wiped out. Which is fine, because a lot of those villains are really lame, including Nathan Fillion, who plays the supervillain who can disassemble his limbs like a doll. Yeah, it's pretty lame, and that's sort of the joke. But yeah, they pulled a similar sequence that they did in Deadpool 2. But it also begs the question what kind of comedy we could have had with these teams if we had a little bit longer to spend time with them. Because we also get another strange choice of Weasel, who's this really obscure DC comic book villain who is really frighteningly designed. It's gonna be interesting if we see him in the future and what kind of antics he could get in. But you know, that explains a lot of the movie, is that it just embraces all this silliness by taking villains that are really obscure and really, well, dumb from the comic book pages and throws all the money at them to give you a really entertaining blockbuster popcorn flick for the summer. Because even characters like Polka Man has a superpower that's so ridiculous but so cool at the same time. I honestly wanted more of him in the movie. They actually have this weird plot line with him where he has mother issues, so he actually sees his mother sort of projected onto characters throughout the movie. It's a little weird, but it is funny. I don't really have much else to say about the movie. It was action-packed, it was entertaining, it was a lot of fun. There was a lot of funny moments, it was very dark, very graphic. But for the most part though, it's an improvement from the original, but not by a heck of a lot. I know there's some people are going to disagree with me on that, because I know there was a lot of hate for the first Suicide Squad movie, which I think is unfair, because the first one was, you know, it was dumb and it had some flaws, but it was an entertaining flick. And this one is definitely an improvement, but its style no longer is quite as surprising or shocking that the first film had. So I feel like this follow-up film is better, more entertaining, but it's still just sort of a mindless action flick at the same time. So The Suicide Squad gets my score of 3 stars. I think it's fantastic ideas like this can get made into movies nowadays, but at the same time though, you gotta admit after a while, it's sort of the same shit, but just a little bit better. Guys, thanks as always for watching, and have you all seen The Suicide Squad? And if not, what else have you been watching lately? Comment below, let me know, and stay tuned right here if you all want to see more.